The world stopped when it happened. Live on international television. Ibrahim Traoré spoke words so bold, so unexpected, that even Donald Trump himself was forced to react. Within minutes, the clip exploded across social media, leaving millions stunned and asking the same question. How could one young African leader shake the world with just one statement? Asterisk, the studio lights were hot, the cameras fixed, and the journalists across the table prepared for what seemed like a routine interview. Everyone expected Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, to deliver the usual diplomatic answers, polite words about cooperation and progress. Nothing that would spark controversy, but the world was not ready for what came next. With calm composure and eyes locked firmly on the camera, Traoré began to speak, his tone steady, but his words razor sharp. He declared that Africa had been exploited for far too long, treated as nothing more than a resource mine for foreign powers who gave little in return. He said that the days of bowing to pressure, whether from Europe, America, or anyone else, were over. His words struck like thunder in the silent studio, and the journalists froze, unsure how to respond. But Traoré wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice rising with conviction, and addressed Donald Trump directly, saying that no leader, past, present, or future, had the right to decide Africa's destiny except Africans themselves. The air seemed to crackle with tension. Producers behind the glass exchanged shocked glances, and even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. What was meant to be an ordinary political discussion had turned into a moment of defiance broadcast, lived to millions. Within minutes, clips of the statement were already being shared online, captions flashing words like unbelievable, fearless, and historic. By the time the interview ended, it was clear that something extraordinary had happened. Ibrahim Traoré had not just spoken as a president, he had spoken as the voice of a continent, and the world would not forget it. Asterisk, by the time the cameras stopped rolling, the clip of Ibrahim Traoré's bold words had already escaped the studio walls and was racing across the internet like a wildfire. On Twitter, hashtags carrying his name climbed into global trends within hours, with millions replaying the moment. He spoke directly to Donald Trump. TikTok was flooded with short edits of his fiery statement, set to dramatic music, each clip drawing comments from stunned viewers across the world. Some users called him the bravest leader in Africa, while others described the scene as history happening live. On YouTube, reaction videos popped up in dozens of languages, from American commentators shocked by his courage to African creators celebrating him as a hero. WhatsApp groups across the continent buzzed with forwards of the clip, shared endlessly from village to city. For young Africans especially, his words struck like lightning. Finally, someone was saying out loud what they had always felt, but never heard from a leader on global television. Even critics, who disagreed with his message, admitted that his fearlessness was undeniable. In just one night, Ibrahim Traoré had gone from a national figure to an international sensation. The internet became a battlefield of opinions. Some praised his honesty, others warned that his defiance would bring consequences. But whether people loved him or hated him, they all kept watching, replaying, and sharing. In a matter of hours, one live statement had transformed into a movement online, uniting voices across continents in heated debate. And as the numbers kept climbing, millions of views, thousands of posts, endless comments, one truth became clear. Ibrahim Traoré's words were no longer his alone. They belonged to the people now, and the world could not look away. Asterisk, in the United States, the video of Ibrahim Traoré's live TV statement spread across newsrooms like a storm. Morning talk shows replayed the clip on loop, anchors shaking their heads in disbelief at the boldness of the young African leader. By afternoon, reporters were pressing Donald Trump for a reaction. At first, he brushed it aside with his usual smirk, but when the clip was played back to him in front of flashing cameras, his demeanor shifted. He laughed, raising his eyebrows as if amused, but then his tone grew sharp. Trump called Traoré too bold for his own good, warning that such defiance was dangerous in international politics. Yet even in his criticism, he could not hide a note of respect. He admitted that rarely had he seen an African leader speak so directly, so fearlessly. On live television, his words ricocheted instantly across social media. Supporters of Traoré seized on them, claiming that even Trump's reaction proved their leader had shaken the status quo. Analysts debated furiously on American channels. Some argued Traoré was reckless and would isolate his nation. while others insisted he was simply speaking the truth no one else dared to. The clash of opinions only gave more fuel to the fire online. In Africa, Trump's response was seen as proof that the world had finally been forced to listen. On the streets of Ouagadougou, people gathered around radios and phones, laughing at Trump's reaction, cheering that their leader's voice had carried across oceans. What began as a single interview had now turned into a dialogue between continents, and the echoes of that moment continued to grow louder. For the first time, an African president's words had pulled a direct response from Trump himself, and the world was watching closely to see what would come next. As Trump's reaction spread across screens worldwide, the debate deepened, splitting opinions as sharply as a blade. In Western capitals, officials and commentators accused Ibrahim Traoré of being reckless, claiming his bold defiance would isolate Burkina Faso and worsen its struggles. Newspaper headlines warned of dangerous populism, and diplomats whispered of sanctions, while think tanks rushed to paint him as an unpredictable risk. Yet in Africa, the mood was completely different. From the busy streets of Lagos to the markets of Dakar, ordinary people repeated his words with pride, as if they belonged to them too. In Ouagadougou, his quotes appeared on banners carried through the city, painted on walls and chanted in rallies that grew larger each day. Students shared the clip in classrooms, teachers discussed it in lectures, and families debated it over evening meals. It was no longer just a political statement. It had become a symbol of dignity. For years, many Africans had felt silenced by foreign control and local leaders who bowed easily to outside powers. But Traoré's voice gave them something different: hope. Even those who disagreed with some of his policies admitted that his courage had awakened a sleeping pride. International analysts argued endlessly on TV screens, warning of instability. Yet the people on the ground saw something else, a chance to reclaim their story. The divide between the West's fear and Africa's hope grew wider with each passing day, until it felt as though two worlds were speaking different languages. What one side called dangerous, the other called liberation. And at the center of it all stood Ibrahim Traoré, his words echoing far beyond Burkina Faso, becoming a mirror that forced the world to confront a new reality. Africa was no longer whispering. It was shouting. Days passed, yet the momentum refused to die. The clip of Ibrahim Traoré's live statement continued to circle the globe, replayed on giant screens in African capitals, on phones in remote villages, and on news broadcasts. From New York to Paris, in places where electricity was scarce, people gathered around radios to hear his words repeated, and each time they were spoken, they carried the same force as the first broadcast. Across Burkina Faso, chants of his message filled rallies, transforming marketplaces into arenas of solidarity and town squares into seas of raised fists. Children memorized his words, repeating them in playgrounds as though they were songs, while elders nodded with pride, whispering that they had waited their whole lives to hear such defiance spoken in public. The world's leaders kept watching, some with concern, others with admiration. But no one could deny the scale of the impact. Traoré had ignited something larger than himself, a movement, a spirit, a belief that Africa's dignity could no longer be negotiated away behind closed doors. Commentators began calling it the speech that shook the balance, a moment when history pivoted, not because of armies or wealth, but because of words. For many, it didn't matter what came next, sanctions, pressure, or backlash. The people had already claimed victory in their hearts. A young leader from Burkina Faso had faced the world unafraid, and his voice now echoed in classrooms, in rallies, and across generations. The message was simple yet unstoppable: Africa would no longer be silent. And as the clip continued to spread, one truth became clear. What happened that night on live TV was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new chapter for a continent ready to rise. Asterisk, if this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share with others. Asterisk, and make sure to subscribe to Faso Histories for more powerful stories from Africa and beyond. Asterisk.